Alright everyone, Tubbers Tuesday. What we're going to do then about our KPIs. We've kind of discussed a lot about what goes into making KPIs and how we're going to make them successful. What we need to do first though is make my channel successful. So if you haven't already, go down, like and subscribe and let YouTube know just how great the content here is. In terms of KPIs, it's really easy to actually get dragged down and to get bogged down with a lot of detail about them rather than actually focusing on what they are. And the core things are around, the areas that they're supposed to be supporting. So is it a sales KPI, is it a warehouse KPI, is it a training KPI, or is it an overall KPI? Bearing in mind, of course, that we've got the dreaded infinite recursion to remember. It's turtles all the way down. So with your KPIs, what I always find and what is recommended is simple, right? Simple is best. Remember, a KPI needs to be something that somebody can view and understand and take in immediately. It's not about a long-term comparison or anything. It's about where are we now? Where are we? What's the current status? That's the vital part about it. It might well be that when you go and you do more, you want to be able to compare the KPI over time, but the core KPI is very simple. So you'll often find that a sum or a count or at most an average will do. So like what's our total sales? How many orders we're involved in making that up? And what percentage of those were shipped on time? So we've got 3 core KRAs that would then go through to support what would be our overarching sales measure. And we might say for our sales KPI we want to look at total profit, for example, but we'd have our total sales, our order count and our on-time completed count or on-time delivery count as our average on-time delivery as our KRAs for that total profit KPI. Yeah? Everyone happy? So the thing I want you to understand with Power BI, because we started saying that we're talking a bit more about Power BI last week. So with Power BI, the nice thing about it is it really supports this structure. So you have the data model piece, which is the base layer. You need to get your data modeling right. So build your data model using fact tables and dimensions. And again, a fact and dimension, think of them as a pivot table. The columns and the row headers are your dimensions. And the bit in the middle, the values, is your facts. Okay? It's the easiest way to think about them. You then have measures, and those are the aggregations that have gone on to build your facts. Yeah, so that's kind of, what did you do when you built your pivot table? Did you tell it to sum them? Did you tell it to count them? Did you tell it to average them? Yeah, those kind of things. And what you find is that is all that you need to do as a basic to get started within Power BI. And the nice thing and the strength of Power BI is that the DAX language is portable. And what that means is that nothing is set in stone until context is applied. So these simple measures, and the simpler the better, really, are then entirely shaped by context. So if we have our total sales measure, and we then apply that to a year, that's total sales this year, or last year, or whatever year it is that it's running against. So if our target is to make a certain amount of profit this year, we can simply put this year in a visual and then put the total profit against it, and it will be there. If we want to know that by the product lines or something like that, if we apply that as context, that is then available to us. So it's a very portable language, but it all comes down to keeping it simple. The more context you put into your measure, you find that it's going to restrict where you can use it going forward. So it's be aware, but you're not limited by it. Nesting of measures is a vital part of DAX, and as you build up and increase and grow your DAX, you'll find nesting becomes important. You do use it for some of the averages, so you might say, well, we've got our order count, and you might want to have then an order count of on time, if you've got so you'll have your on time order count, or your average on time, and that would be based on your orders, and your order should know, or you should know, if that order was delivered or fulfilled on time or fulfilled late at that row level. Once you've got that, you can then do the average. And you might have an on-time count and an all count. And then the average is just the divide of the on-time by the all. And it works perfectly. Okay? But that nesting is vital. It comes through more and more when you start going into other areas. So as we talk about, a KPI is that top level. It needs to just be that number, or that, well, I keep saying avoid the number, but it needs to be that kind of, what's our status? Are we red? Are we green? Are we amber? What's the state? Your KRA is similar, but it's going to be around the support side of it. Where you get into the complexity is with that next level down, the analysis piece, okay? And it's important that you understand the difference between the KPI, the KRA side, and then the analysis side. Because all too often you get dragged at that top level from like your board, getting dragged down at little analysis pieces that aren't going to serve business value, but it becomes, oh, I need to understand. I want to know that next level down. And this is where we get into that whole infinite recursion piece where you need to make sure you're not chasing your tail. So time intelligence, again, you can do that as with nesting. So you can have your last year measure, which would be based on your current year and your last year. You can then do a year-on-year difference, which would be the two nested again, right? And the main reason for using time intelligence would be if you want to see cumulative over time. So the nature of a sum is that it will give you, this is what happened at this point. So if you put a daily, it'll give you a daily sum. If you put a month, it'll give you a month sum. If you put a year, it'll give you a year sum. It won't give you, here's the month broken down day by day so we can see the nice line, the nice line going in the right direction, hopefully, for us. So we can kind of see, engage, and understand what that would look like and what that means. X functions are similar. So X functions are iterative functions within Power BI. So they will go through row by row and they will perform an evaluation. So you've got your sum X, you've got your count X, average X. All of those are useful, but they have very specific times when you will use them as opposed to their non-X brethren. The exception being ranking. Rank X is one of those that you need to get your head around. You need to understand it. And I'm likely going to do a specific video about it in the next couple of weeks. Just because it is a top one that you just need to really get your head around. But what the main thing you have to understand is these are wider scale measures. These are not something that we look at and go, right, I need to understand blah, okay? Or at the top level, my manager needs to know last year. No, they don't, because that's not going to help them now. It might be a relative to last year. You might decide that your KPI is the year-on-year percentage growth, because that might be your core thing. We want to grow our sales by 5%, by 10%, by 20%, by whatever. And so your year-on-year growth becomes important. But you wouldn't then want to show the whole makeup of it. Yeah? Okay? So let's cut an hour into Power BI desktop, and I'm going to show you some stuff, and we'll go in and we'll do a little bit more with these kind of KPIs, just a little bit of a practical. Alright, so New York rooftop water tower inspections. This is a great example of kind of a top level report that you might see. Okay, this is something that I see quite a lot of, and it's all right, but it's not great. Okay, and I know this is one I put together. This isn't a KPI report though, right? This is much more about what's going on, because if we were to start looking at what's a KPI, we would need to understand what is the goal, what are we looking for, and what we find is that actually much more this part down here. Let's expand this out, expand that out, there we go, right, is much more what we would look at typically as a KPI. So what we've got here is our inspected by percentage. So what percentage are these people doing, is this company doing. And that might be something more that we look at in terms of the KPI. We've got our inspections as well. So I'm sure from a company perspective that they're going to look and try and see how are we performing. You know, what have we done this many inspections? And that's likely to be part of their KPI structure. So well, let's look at bringing this into Power BI and what we could do with it. So I've got my blank Power BI file here. Nice, simple. What we're going to do is we're going to use a Power BI data set. So I'm going to click there, and then we're going to use our New York water tower inspection ones. This one, isn't it? Yeah. I'm going to click create. So we've now created a connection to our model that's published up into the cloud. Okay, and we can see the measures that we've got there. So what I was saying before around context is provided. If we looked at inspections, and this is the nice part about these secondary reports within Power BI, is I don't see the context, I don't understand. I don't need to know what's going on to do it. I can pull this in and I can see how many inspections there have been. I could then say I want to know how many there have been this year. So I'll bring in calendar. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the drift columns for these. So I'm going to bring in year drift and put it there. And I'm going to say where it is, 0. And year drift is its relative year. So 0 is this year, -1 is last year, -2 is 2 years ago. Okay, I use drift columns for years, for months, and for days. And I find they're just really useful for just managing these, especially as you get into the time intelligence side. Because over time, obviously, things move. And if you put just the date in, you find it changes. There are, and Power BI has got better now, you can put in date filters more effectively, like last year now and things like that. But when I did all this initially, you couldn't. So this is how I do it, and I'm sticking to it. So if you say, oh, you're getting old-fashioned, like, fair enough. So we've got this, and we can see there have been 1,045 inspections this year so far. But how does that compare to last year is the question that's invariably going to come. Okay, and this is where your next level down starts to be. But remember, from my perspective, all I've done is I've brought in this one measure, so the middle bit of me pivot table, and put a row or a column, whatever you want to call it a row, right? And then just build it. So I've just got the top one. Okay, and that's not too difficult. Anyone can do that, can't they? We could bring years in and remove our filter there and actually see over time how many inspections there have been. Okay, we can put some more context into it because we can look into the buildings and we can then say, well, which borough have they been? If we bring that into the legends. Okay, and let's make that, I'll tell you what, let's do it that way so that looks a bit better, doesn't it? Right, now all of a sudden, from that one measure that's been written, I've got something that's going to provide a lot more context, isn't it? How are we performing? And we can just see at a glance. Right? This is now where issues will start to be. So if you remember, what I was saying before was that we want our KPI, or what we're showing people, is 0, okay, to be simple, at a glance, understood, right? So the at a glance understanding of this isn't there. What does it mean from an inspections perspective? So one of the things I might want to do is to add a last year measure, okay? So I'm going to right click and select to write a new measure. Let's zoom in a bit so it's easier to see. Inspections ly equals calculate inspections, nesting, remember? So I haven't had to rewrite the inspections. I know there's going to be consistency. So from my business perspective, if I had business rules in as to what qualified an inspection, we might say, oh, if it's done by the federal government, it doesn't count, or something along those lines. We'd have business rules that would apply. So inspections would then be reused, and the nesting side of it makes this much more consistent, comma. The next one, we're going to filter this, so we're going to put same period last year, using dates. Okay? And then close brackets. So now, if I bring this in and put it there, we're seeing what happened last year. And I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's make this, okay? So we can see the dark blue is a mirror of what it was before. So that helps, that makes things easier. The challenge I've got though, okay, and this is where we've got a bit of a problem, is that for 2021, do I want to compare the full year with where we are? Okay. And this is part of one of those issues again. So we then get to the point of saying, right, well, do we need to use another drift? And we do. So let's bring in our day drift. Okay, and what I'm going to do is bring the day drift in here, put that on there, where it is less than, well, it's already less than, isn't it? Less than 0, apply the filter. And we can see that then drops it down. So we're now looking up to this point in July, how many inspections were there? And we can see, we definitely are down. We got this mindset straight away already. We've built it. This is easy, okay? And all we've had to do is, realistically, when I look at it, I've added a clause to an existing measure. So we've been able to nest it, add a clause. I haven't had to know the business logic. I haven't had to know that. I can just write that in. So let's see, what does a percentage difference look like? So if we go right click, new measure, YOY change percentage equals. Oh. And this is going to be divide. Inspections by last year, enter that, okay, and that's going to be a percentage. Okay, so I've put that in, put a date filter on it to -5, so we just look at the last 5 years, just so that it brings these percentages into a more reasonable amount. And we can see that we're down at 40% of what we've done previously, whereas last year we were at 111%, I think. Yeah, 111. So definitely it's been a drop. And then you can say, well, I want to really understand what's going on. What's the context around that? So because we've used the same period last year as our measure, what we can do is we can bring this in so you can see. This is a day-by-day level, isn't it? This is going to show me day by day how we have progressed. So it's looking at when we're at the 26th of February, this year we did 4 inspections, last year we did 8. It's useful to know in terms of grade, but one of the things with these kind of measures is you need to be careful about the differences in terms of the day, especially at this level, that potentially they're not going to do any inspections over the weekend, or there might be a different day that they don't do them because Manhattan might be with a lot of businesses. They don't like having their water inspected during the day. I don't know. Or during the working day. I don't know. So you can kind of see though that there's going to be differences. That kind of a day of a weekly pattern is going to influence this kind of a day by day breakdown. But what we can see is that this year it's not picked up. Whereas last year it seems that almost as the COVID lockdown in New York started to subside towards June, inspection numbers did go back up again, and we can see there's a definite trend there. There's one day it seems to be down, so presumably it's a Sunday that they don't do inspections. I guess I'm not going to go through and look and see what was the 14th of June 2020. Okay, I can't remember off the top of my head. So what do you reckon then? Okay, getting this right and understanding what people mean by KPIs and when they're useful versus that analysis piece is a major step change that you will make as your development skills improve. It is difficult to get senior management especially to be prepared to say, you're right, I don't need to see the numbers. But at the same time, this is one of the biggest dangers of big data, and as more analysis capability becomes available to all, is that management will chase their tails down the rabbit hole and look, it's turtles all the way down. And the goal of a good KPI structure and good report structure is around very much that top level, this is all you need to see. And it's not a case of saying, we don't want you to see it. It's a case of saying, this is what you need to do your job. And I've said it in the past, it's partly a joke, I guess. Maybe it isn't. You guys work out. All a CEO needs really is like kind of 3 lights on the desk, isn't it? A little red light, a little amber light, and a little green light. And then, it's green. Great, I can play golf. Okay, that's kind of it. And it is tongue-in-cheek, but there's a lot of truth in there as well, because if you are focusing on what's happening there and you're bringing that level of management and attention to it, you aren't necessarily helping the fix. Detail isn't necessarily adding value. And that's something that people as a whole need to get more comfortable with. And that's why when we talk about establishing a good data culture within your organization and starting to really appreciate your data, we always talk about it with that in mind, and also with the mindset that you're going to need to have trust. Because if your team don't trust you and you don't trust your teams as well, which is kind of the most important point, your KPIs kind of flounder because you're not using them. And because you're not using them and you're focusing on that detail, it becomes very much a case that you cause problems. It's like when you're learning to drive, isn't it? That a learner driver, they're focused on like the road right in front of them and what's going on, right? Whereas as you become more experienced, you stop looking at the what's going on and you start to be aware of the what's coming up. And the only way you can get the what's coming up awareness and the ability to prepare and plan and be thinking about that is by not focusing on the now, yeah? So have a think about that, Sometimes I know what I'm talking about. Don't forget, if you haven't already, like and subscribe down below. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you think, how you're making your business move forward with their data more effectively. Don't forget, come back on Friday, join us for something for the weekend. Have a great week. Take care. Ta-da.